Hello, my name is Austin Habish, the founder of Think Catholic, and you're listening to the Summa podcast, where we study St. Thomas Aquinas' Summa Theologiae in a way simple and insightful for anyone to understand. The Summa podcast is brought to you by Think Catholic. Taking 2 questions of the Summa a day, we'll seek to summarize St. Thomas's responses, discovering the brilliance of Aquinas and his Catholic faith. This is day 51. So let's get started. We're covering today questions 99 and 100 of the prima pars, that is, of the condition of the offspring as to the body, and of the condition of the offspring as regards righteousness. The translation that I always use in these podcasts is the one generously provided to me by Ave Maria Press, the 5-volume set translated by the Fathers of the English Dominican Province, which you can now get at a discounted price from Ave Maria Press's site by typing in the code SUMMA 10. And so here we go. And this may be a shorter episode with only 4 articles total, yet in fidelity to the pace and structure we have chosen for this podcast series, we will simply begin with Article 1. Whether in the state of innocence children would have had perfect strength of body as to the use of its members immediately after birth. Might sound like a strange question, but Aquinas is trying to be very thorough in this investigation of man pre-fall, or if he would have continued in the state of innocence. What perfections might he have had, and what perfections might he have not had? The question here is whether, in the state of innocence, a child immediately upon birth would have had the capability to walk and crawl or anything else it wanted to do with its bodily limbs. Aquinas, in brief, says that it is natural that man should grow and develop over time, so even though by some particular grace a child in the state of innocence might have had perfect strength of body, there's nothing contrary to reason in supposing that it wouldn't have. St. Thomas writes, "We must therefore conclude that children would not have had sufficient strength for the use of their limbs for the purpose of performing every kind of act, but only for the acts befitting the state of infancy, such as suckling and the like." Article 2, whether in the primitive state woman would have been born. What in the world is this question? Aquinas here is responding to Aristotle, who thought that, quote, woman is a misbegotten male, which is just tragic. But we have to forgive Aristotle for his confusion. He was not a Catholic, and it's not like his biology was incredibly advanced living in the 300s BC. St. Thomas responds to this question in writing, nature's process and generation would have been in harmony with the manner in which it was established by God, but established male and female in human nature, as it is written in Genesis. Therefore, also in the state of innocence, male and female would have been born. Simple, and that's it for half of the articles of this episode. So for the regular listener to this podcast, today will be a kind of mental break with some extra time after the episode to review a former one as well, perhaps. Moving on to question 100, of the condition of the offspring as regards righteousness. Article 1, whether men would have been born in a state of righteousness. This is a good question because post-fall, according to Revelation, each one of us is born in a state of privation, in a state of loss of that perfection which Adam had in the garden, what we call original sin. So the question here is, if Adam had not fallen, would his descendants have been simply conceived and born in a state of justice? And even more than that, according to Aquinas, would they have been born in a state of grace or a state of supernatural gift? St. Thomas says yes, and he defends his position by reminding us first of that original justice in which Adam was created in, which we discussed in episode 49, where Aquinas argues based on Scripture that if man was made right in the beginning and immediately after the fall began to feel passions contrary to his will and intellect, then such a subjection of his passions to his will must not have been natural, but by a supernatural gift, which would have remained provided his intellect and will remained subjected to God. Therefore, if Adam and Eve were created in original righteousness, which also included this elevation by grace, at the very least a supernatural subjection of man's passions to his reason, then we can assume their children would have been born in a similar state. And how that grace would have been imparted, St. Thomas says, this grace, however, would not have been natural, but would have been conferred on man immediately on his receiving a rational soul, in the same way the rational soul, which is not transmitted by the parent, is infused by God as soon as the human body is apt to receive it. And that brings us to our last article of this episode, Article 2, whether in the state of innocence children would have been born confirmed in righteousness. Confirmed in righteousness means here placed in a state of righteousness from which one could not depart from, which occurs ordinarily through the beatific vision, because in seeing God as he is, being united to God in a supernatural way, especially in the mind, see episode 7 on that, in knowing God's essence, we will also know unshakably and eternally that in God's will and in God's being, our true happiness resides, and so will not choose to depart from it. This article is asking, could Adam's children have sinned in the state of innocence, just like he had the possibility to sin, or would they have been born confirmed in righteousness? St. Thomas says that since Adam was not born confirmed in righteousness, there's no reason to suppose his children would have been born conformed in righteousness either. In his words, it does not seem possible that in the state of innocence children would have been born confirmed in righteousness, for it is clear that at their birth they would not have had greater perfection than their parents at the time of begetting. Now the parents, as long as they begot children, would not have been confirmed in righteousness. St. Thomas then adds, as an interesting side note, that just as Jesus says man and woman in heaven will be like the angels, neither marrying nor given to marriage, that if Adam and Eve had not fallen and had been confirmed in grace via the beatific vision, from that point they would have ceased to have children as well, taking then a new, more spiritualized manner of existing. So in this way as well, there could be no way of passing on a confirmation of righteousness by generation. In his words, and as soon as Adam had attained to that happy state of seeing God in his essence, he would have become spiritual in soul and body, and his animal life would have ceased, wherein alone there is generation. Hence it is clear that children would not have been born confirmed in righteousness. And that is all for our relatively brief episode and treatment of questions 99 and 100 of the Prima Pars, that is, of the condition of the offspring as to the body, and of the condition of the offspring as regards righteousness. My name is Austin Habish with Think Catholic, and I cannot wait to see you tomorrow.